Have you ever noticed how a whole life can begin to change because of one silent thought that nobody else can see? A door opens, a face appears, a word is spoken. A small event passes through the day. Outwardly, almost nothing has happened. Yet inside the heart, a thought rises. It may be a thought of respect or contempt, a thought of patience or irritation, a thought of kindness or coldness. And from that one thought, a road begins. Many people believe that their future is shaped only by great events, by luck, by money, by powerful people, or by a sudden moment that changes everything. But the Buddha pointed to something much closer than all of that. He pointed to the mind. He taught that what we repeatedly think, we slowly become. What we allow in the heart today becomes the direction of our speech tomorrow, our actions the next day, our habits the next month, and our destiny over the years. This is why a single thought is never just a small thing. A single thought is a seed. If the seed is wholesome, it quietly grows into peace. If the seed is unwholesome, it quietly grows into suffering. The tree is not visible at once, but the seed has already chosen its direction. Dear friends, welcome to Buddha Peaceful Mind. If this kind of teaching brings warmth to your heart, you may gently support the channel with a like and subscribe, so more people who are tired, burdened, or quietly suffering can also find a moment of peace here. Today we are reflecting on a truth that is simple to hear, but not easy to live. Your future depends on the thoughts you keep feeding every day. Not once in a while, not only in the meditation hall, not only when life is calm. Every day, in the market, at home, at work, in traffic, in sickness, in disappointment, in praise, in blame. In all of it, the mind is planting seeds. There is an old Buddhist story about two merchants who stood together in a crowd when the Buddha was teaching. They looked at the same Blessed One. They heard the same voice. They stood under the same sky. Yet they did not receive the same world. One merchant looked at the Buddha with reverence. He felt something noble. He thought, "This is truly a great being. How wise must a king be to bow before such wisdom?" In that moment, faith arose in him. Respect arose in him. Softness arose in him. A beautiful movement began in his heart. The other merchant looked at the Buddha and felt only pride and mockery. He thought, "Why should anyone honor this man? What is so special here?" In that moment, contempt arose in him. Scorn arose in him. Darkness began moving through his own mind. The story says that later their paths unfolded very differently. But before we even speak of outer results, the deeper teaching is this. The fruit had already started to ripen at the moment of the thought itself. The man with respect was already receiving a blessing in his own heart. The man with contempt was already burning in the fire of his own pride. This is how karma often begins, not as thunder from the sky, but as a movement in the mind. Not far away, right here, right now. A thought of gratitude makes the heart spacious. A thought of jealousy makes the heart narrow. A thought of compassion makes the face softer, the voice gentler, the body less tense. A thought of hatred hardens the mouth, shakes the nerves, poisons sleep, and turns even a pleasant day into a hidden prison. So when we ask about the future, the Buddha invites us to begin much nearer than we expect. He does not first ask what job you have, how many followers you have, what people think of you, or how many plans you have made. He asks, what are you feeding in the mind? What kind of seeds are you watering every day? Because your life is already growing from there. There are people who speak politely, but secretly rehearse resentment every night. There are people who smile in public, but nourish jealousy in private. There are people who do generous acts, but keep calculating praise in the mind. And there are others who have little money, little recognition, little power, yet their hearts are honest, humble, and kind. The outer form is not the deepest truth. The thought behind it matters. The Buddha never asked us merely to decorate life from the outside. He asked us to understand the root. If the root is bitter, the fruit will carry bitterness. If the root is clean, the fruit will nourish others. That is why this teaching is both beautiful and frightening. Beautiful, because even if your past has been heavy, you can begin planting different seeds today. Frightening, because no one else can do this work for you. No temple can think for you. No teacher can purify the mind for you. No ritual can replace the simple honesty of watching what you are feeding in your own heart. So let us sit with this quietly. Maybe your whole future is not waiting for one dramatic miracle. Maybe it is already being formed by the thoughts you repeat when nobody is watching. Maybe heaven and hell do not begin after death alone. Maybe they begin in the very next thought. The story of the two merchants is not only about reward and punishment. It is a mirror. It asks us, when we stand before goodness, what arises in us? When we see wisdom, do we bow inwardly, or do we feel threatened? When we see another person receiving love, success, or respect, do we rejoice, or does comparison start speaking inside us? Two people can see the same kind act, the same teacher, the same event, the same family member, and walk away with completely different futures because they did not walk away with the same mind. Imagine two sisters caring for an aging mother. Both do the same outer task. They prepare food. They wash clothes. They accompany their mother to the clinic. From the outside, their actions look almost identical. But one sister thinks, "This is my burden. Why do I always have to do this? Nobody sees how much I suffer." In her mind, resentment grows. Each small duty becomes heavier. Her face becomes tired. Her voice becomes sharp. She is exhausted, not only by the work, but by the hidden commentary in her own heart. The other sister thinks, "My mother once carried me when I could not walk. She stayed awake when I had fever. She worried for me before I knew what worry was. Let me serve while there is still time." Her body may be just as tired, but the quality of her heart is different. The same action becomes softer. The same labor becomes warmer. The same long day does not wound her in the same way, because she is not stabbing herself with bitter thoughts each hour. This is why the Buddha placed such importance on intention. Intention is the bridge between the invisible mind and the visible world. It is the hidden architect of karma. Speech and action matter greatly, but intention gives them their moral weight. A gift offered with kindness and a gift offered with vanity do not leave the same imprint. Silence held in wisdom and silence held in cold punishment are not the same silence. A hard truth spoken with compassion and a hard truth spoken to humiliate another are not the same truth. Many of us spend our lives trying to control events while neglecting intention. We want better circumstances, but do not train the mind that is meeting those circumstances. We want peace in the home, but continue nourishing small irritations, judgments, and old stories. We want trust in relationships, but keep feeding suspicion. We want clear decisions, but keep returning to fear. Then we wonder why life feels tangled. The Buddha is asking us to go one step deeper. Do not look only at what happened. Look at what arose in the mind when it happened. That is where suffering often takes root. A person hears criticism. Immediately a thought appears. They are attacking me. They do not respect me. I must answer back. From one thought, anger grows. Then speech follows. Then damage follows. Another person hears the same criticism, and a different thought appears. Let me listen carefully. Maybe some part of this is true. Maybe some part is not. I do not need to burn the whole forest because of one spark. This second person may still feel pain, but the pain does not become a storm in the same way. One thought does not always change the whole outer world at once, but it changes the inner position from which we meet the world. And that position changes everything. The merchant who respected the Buddha did not merely earn merit in some distant future. In that very moment, he was already closer to humility, closer to receptivity, closer to blessings. The one who mocked was already farther from them. His own contempt closed the door that grace was trying to enter through. This is something we all know from experience. When the mind is proud, even good advice feels insulting. When the mind is soft, even difficulty can become a teacher. When the mind is bitter, even kindness is doubted. When the mind is grateful, even a small cup of tea feels abundant. So the question is not only, what happened to me today? The deeper question is, what arose in me today? Did I feed faith or cynicism, patience or anger, humility or arrogance, generosity or greed? Each of these is building a path. The Buddha did not teach this so that we would become afraid of every passing thought. Thoughts do arise from old habits, old wounds, old conditions. Sometimes a harsh thought appears before we are ready. Sometimes envy flashes. Sometimes irritation jumps up. The practice is not to hate ourselves for seeing this. The practice is to notice, not feed, and gently choose again. This is where freedom begins, not in never having an unwholesome thought, but in no longer bowing to every thought as if it were truth. You can notice contempt and not follow it. You can feel anger and not become its servant. You can hear fear and not let it sit on the throne. This is already the beginning of a different future. When we understand this, even small moments become sacred. Waiting in line becomes practice. Washing dishes becomes practice. Being misunderstood becomes practice. Success becomes practice. Failure becomes practice. All of life becomes a place where seeds are planted, and every seed matters. The Buddha once expressed a profound truth in very simple form. The mind comes first. If the mind is stained, suffering follows. If the mind is clear, peace follows like a shadow that never leaves. This is not poetry only. It is a description of how life works. Take a very ordinary example. A man wakes in the morning and sees a message on his phone. His coworker has not replied to an important question. At once, a thought arises. He is ignoring me. He does not value my work. He always treats me like this. Nothing has been confirmed, yet the mind has already written a story. With that story, tension enters the chest. Irritation enters the voice. When he meets the coworker later, he speaks coldly. The coworker, surprised and wounded, also becomes defensive. A whole day becomes unpleasant, all because of a thought that was never examined. Now imagine the same morning with a different thought. Perhaps he is busy. Perhaps something happened. Let me ask calmly when I see him. The body remains lighter. The face remains open. The conversation later becomes simple. Maybe the coworker had indeed been caring for a sick child. Maybe his phone battery had died. The same event could have led to conflict or understanding. The first step was the thought. This is why the Buddha taught careful attention. He was not asking us to become cold observers who feel nothing. He was asking us to stop making an enemy out of life by believing every impulse that crosses the mind. A thought is not always a command. It is not always wisdom. It may be an echo from fear. It may be a wound speaking. It may be habit. It may be pride. When the mind is untrained, it turns passing thoughts into identity. I am angry, so I must speak. I am jealous, so I must compare. I am afraid, so I must withdraw. I am proud, so I must defend myself. But when the mind is trained, there is a pause. In that pause, a person sees, anger is here, fear is here, jealousy is here. But I do not have to build a house for them. I can let them pass. That pause is not small. That pause can save families. It can save friendships. It can save health. It can save years of regret. There was once a young novice in a monastery who was sincere but quick-tempered. He wanted to meditate well, memorize teachings well, and be respected by the older monks. But because he longed to be seen as good, he became secretly offended whenever anyone corrected him. One day, while he was sweeping the courtyard, an elder monk said gently, "You missed the leaves near the steps." The novice bowed, but inside he thought, "He always watches me. He never sees my effort. He only sees my mistakes." That one thought stayed with him the whole day. During chanting, he could not focus. During the meal, he replayed the moment again and again. By evening, the elder monk seemed like an enemy in his mind. He slept poorly. The next day, he avoided the elder and did his work with a hard face. After several days, the abbot noticed and called him in. The abbot did not ask first about the elder monk. He asked, "What thought did you begin feeding?" The novice was silent. Tears came to his eyes. He realized that the elder had only spoken a sentence, but he had turned it into a private war. The abbot said, "The leaf near the step was not your problem. The thought you kept sweeping back into the heart was the problem." How many of us do this? Every week, maybe every day. Someone says one careless sentence and we carry it for a month. Someone forgets to thank us and we turn it into proof that we are unloved. Someone receives praise and we turn it into evidence that we are less than them. Again and again, the outer event is smaller than the world we build around it. The future is not created by thoughts alone in the magical sense. The Buddha did not teach wishful thinking. He taught karma, which means that mind, speech, and action condition one another. Thoughts shape speech. Speech shapes relationships. Relationships shape opportunities. Inner habits shape outer decisions. So the thought is not the whole story, but it is the beginning of many stories. If you repeatedly think, "I am powerless," then many wholesome actions will never even be attempted. If you repeatedly think, no one can be trusted, then you may create the isolation you fear. If you repeatedly think, "Let me be of use," then your life begins moving towards service, connection, and quiet strength. Thought becomes direction. This is why the Buddha was compassionate, but never casual about the mind. He knew that what feels small today may become a life pattern tomorrow. He knew that unexamined irritation becomes a character. Unexamined greed becomes a life of never enough. Unexamined fear becomes a cage. But he also knew that a small moment of mindfulness can interrupt a chain of suffering that has lasted years. A person may not be able to change every outer condition immediately, but anyone can begin to observe the next thought. That is where practice becomes real. Some people hear teachings about karma and thought and become anxious. They ask, "If one bad thought appears, have I ruined my future? If anger arises in me, am I doomed?" This fear itself becomes another burden. But the Buddha's teaching is not meant to trap us in guilt. It is meant to awaken responsibility with compassion. A seed that falls on the ground does not become a tree in 1 second. It needs water, repetition, protection, and time. A harsh thought that appears for a moment is not the same as a harsh thought that is fed, repeated, justified, and acted upon for years. In the same way, a wholesome thought that appears once is beautiful, but if it is never nourished, it may not grow strong enough to guide a life. So the teaching is not, be terrified of the mind. The teaching is, be intimate with the mind. Know what is happening there. Learn what you are strengthening. Notice what you rehearse. Notice what you keep returning to. There is a difference between seeing anger and becoming anger. There is a difference between feeling envy and choosing to feed envy. There is a difference between the first spark and the fire you build around it. Imagine a woman who is driving home after a difficult day. She is tired. Her shoulders hurt. Her boss criticized her in front of others. On the road, a motorbike cuts sharply in front of her car. Immediately, a hot thought rises. Fool. People are selfish. Why is everyone like this? She feels the body tighten. Another thought comes. My whole life is like this. No one cares. Everything is difficult. Now one small traffic moment has joined hands with 10 old stories. Her suffering becomes much larger than the event itself. But suppose she has practiced watching the mind. The same heat arises, but then another awareness appears. Anger is here. Pain from the office is here too. Let me breathe once before I add more suffering. Nothing magical happens. The traffic is still messy. The body is still tired. But the chain is interrupted. She has not planted the same thorn in her own chest for the 100th time. That matters. The Buddha's path is often described as a path of liberation, but liberation is not always a dramatic, mystical event. Sometimes liberation is simply this: not continuing what hurts, not believing every angry story, not feeding every bitter memory, not adding one more stone to a burden we have already been carrying for years. This is why mindfulness is so precious. Mindfulness is not merely noticing the breath with closed eyes. It is remembering to stay awake in the exact moment the mind starts building suffering. It is seeing, here is blame, here is craving, here is fear, here is vanity, here is tenderness, here is gratitude. It is knowing the taste of each one. A person who cannot recognize the taste of resentment will drink it daily and call it normal. A person who cannot recognize the taste of greed will organize his whole life around wanting more and never understand why he feels poor. A person who cannot recognize the taste of loving kindness may miss the quiet joy that has been available all along. Let me tell you a small story. A widow lived with her only son in a very modest house near the edge of a town. The son loved his mother, but he often felt ashamed of their poverty. One evening, he saw classmates posting pictures of their new phones, their bright homes, and their expensive meals. The thought arose, "My life is miserable. My mother cannot give me anything. Why was I born like this?" He became cold toward her without saying why. The mother noticed the change. She said little. The next morning, before dawn, she left for work carrying a bag of laundry for other families. While she was gone, the son looked around the house and saw the cracks in the wall, the patched blanket, the worn sandals by the door. Then he noticed a lunch wrapped carefully for him on the table, with the larger portion placed on his side as always. A different thought arose. My mother has been giving me what she can every day. It is not much in the eyes of the world, but it is her whole heart. The first thought had made him poor in the middle of love. The second thought made him rich in the middle of hardship. Nothing outside changed in those few minutes. The house was the same. The family income was the same. But the world he inhabited changed completely because of one new understanding in the mind. This is what the Buddha means when he directs us inward. He is not asking us to deny difficulty. He is showing us how we often multiply difficulty by the way we hold it. A painful condition is one thing. The thoughts of resentment, self-pity, blame, and comparison that gather around it are another. We do not always control the first arrows of life. Illness comes, aging comes, loss comes, criticism comes. But the second arrow is often the mind's reaction, and that second arrow, we can learn to stop shooting into ourselves. Because the future grows from thought, the Buddha encouraged not only restraint from unwholesome thinking, but the active cultivation of wholesome states. The mind is not purified by force alone. It is also purified by what we lovingly develop. If a field is full of weeds, you do not help it only by staring at the weeds in frustration. You also plant good seeds. In the same way, if the mind has long been full of fear, anger, and grasping, it is not enough to merely condemn these states. We must also nourish generosity, patience, gratitude, kindness, and wisdom. Otherwise, the heart becomes a battlefield without nourishment. This is where many practitioners become discouraged. They say, "I know I should not be angry, but anger keeps returning. I know I should not compare myself with others, but comparison keeps returning." The Buddha would not tell such a person to hate themselves more. He would say, "Learn to feed something more beautiful." If a mind has been trained for years in complaint, then gratitude may feel weak at first. If a mind has been trained in suspicion, then trust may feel risky. If a mind has been trained in harsh self-judgment, then kindness toward oneself may feel undeserved. But new seeds often feel small before they become strong. We continue because small does not mean powerless. Consider the practice of rejoicing in goodness. Someone else succeeds. Someone else is praised. Someone else is loved. The untrained mind easily thinks, "Why not me? What about my effort? Perhaps they do not deserve it." This thought tightens the heart it creates isolation. We begin to live in competition with everyone. But the Buddha taught mudita, sympathetic joy, the capacity to feel glad for the goodness and happiness of others. At first, this can seem difficult, especially when we ourselves feel overlooked. Yet when we sincerely rejoice in another's blessing, something miraculous happens. Their happiness no longer threatens us. The heart becomes larger. Another person's light does not reduce ours. Instead, the world feels brighter. A teacher in a village once had two students. One learned quickly and was often praised. The other was sincere, but slower. Over time, the slower student began to think, "Master only values him. I will never be enough here." These thoughts made him clumsy. He forgot teachings he had already understood. His resentment became a second burden, heavier than his studies. One evening, the teacher gave him a small lamp and asked him to carry it through the dark path to the river. When they arrived, the teacher said, "Did your lamp become weaker because my lamp was also shining?" The student said, "No." The teacher replied, "Then why do you think another person's growth steals your own? When you compare, you blow at your own flame. When you rejoice, you protect it." This is a subtle but powerful lesson. Many futures are darkened not by great misfortune, but by repeated comparison. We see another person's home, body, partner, income, confidence, opportunities, and we keep telling ourselves that our worth is shrinking. Over time, the mind becomes hostile to reality. Even blessings already present in our life begin to disappear from view. A grateful mind sees enough where an ungrateful mind sees lack. A generous mind sees opportunity where a greedy mind sees scarcity. A humble mind sees teachers where a proud mind sees enemies. The world appears differently according to the state of mind meeting it. The Buddha also encouraged the cultivation of loving kindness, not as a sweet mood, but as a discipline of perception. To practice loving kindness is to train the heart to wish well. May beings be safe. May beings be peaceful. May beings be free from hatred and fear. This matters because the thoughts you repeat become the atmosphere of your inner life. If the atmosphere is hostile, even good conditions feel uneasy. If the atmosphere is benevolent, even difficulty becomes more workable. There are people who have comfortable lives and yet cannot rest because the mind is always suspicious, hungry, offended, or grasping. There are others who pass through hardship with surprising dignity because they have cultivated a gentle mind. This does not mean they do not feel sorrow. It means sorrow does not become cruelty inside them. So when you notice an unwholesome pattern, do not only ask, "How do I stop this?" Also ask, "What wholesome quality can I feed instead?" If resentment appears, can I feed understanding? If envy appears, can I feed rejoicing? If self-hatred appears, can I feed patience? If agitation appears, can I feed breathing and presence? If greed appears, can I feed contentment? The future changes not only when we uproot weeds, but when we keep planting what is beautiful until the field begins to change its nature. At this point, it is important to say something carefully. When we speak about wholesome and unwholesome thoughts, we are not speaking about becoming fake, passive, or naive. The Buddha did not ask us to cover pain with pretty words. He did not ask us to pretend that injustice is acceptable or that all situations should simply be endured in silence. Wisdom is not weakness. A wholesome mind can still set boundaries. A compassionate heart can still speak firmly. A clear mind can still leave what is harmful. The question is not whether you act, but from what state of mind you act. Are you acting from wisdom or from hatred? From courage or from revenge? From clarity or from wounded pride? There was a lay follower who worked in a busy market. One of his partners often cheated customers by changing weights and lying about prices. For many months, the lay follower remained silent because he was afraid of conflict. Yet inside, anger grew. Every day he thought, "He is corrupt. I despise him." One day his hatred overflowed and he publicly humiliated the partner in front of everyone. The partner reacted with rage. The market divided. Trust was broken in many directions. Later, the lay follower came to a monk and said, "I spoke the truth. Why is there so much suffering after truth was spoken?" The monk asked, "Was it truth alone that you spoke? Or had months of contempt already mixed with it?" The man became quiet. He saw that he had waited until the heart was poisoned and then used truth like a weapon. A wiser path would have been to speak earlier, with steadiness and concern, before resentment turned honesty into attack. This is a great teaching for our time. Many people pride themselves on being honest, but what they call honesty is often aggression. They say, "I am just telling it like it is," while the mind secretly enjoys cutting another person. That kind of speech does not liberate. It wounds both sides. The Buddha taught right speech, speech that is truthful, beneficial, timely, and spoken with a heart of goodwill. Notice that truth alone is not the full measure. Timing matters, benefit matters, goodwill matters. The state of mind matters. Let us bring this back to the shaping of the future. If your mind repeatedly rehearses contempt, then even necessary truth will come out with poison. If your mind repeatedly practices kindness and patience, then firmness will come out with dignity. The future of your relationships is already hidden in the tone you are cultivating today. A mother corrects a child. One way she thinks, "Why are you always like this? You never listen. You exhaust me." In that state, even helpful words carry rejection. Another way she thinks, "My child is learning. Let me be steady. Let me teach without shaming." The child receives something entirely different. The outer correction may sound similar, but the inner energy is not the same, and children feel this deeply. A manager leads a team. One way he thinks, "These people are obstacles. If they make mistakes, I lose face." Another way he thinks, "They are human beings under pressure, just like me. I must guide clearly, but without making fear the climate of the workplace." Over time, these two minds create two different worlds under one roof. A husband comes home exhausted. His wife asks a simple question, and he hears it through a tired mind as accusation. He thinks, "She does not appreciate how hard I work." He answers sharply. A small evening becomes a cold night. Another day, he notices the same defensiveness rising and thinks, "I am tired and easily hurt right now. Let me not place that burden on her." With that one moment of awareness, an argument may never begin. So when we speak of guarding thoughts, we are speaking of the hidden birthplace of the life we are living together. The family you are building tomorrow is being built by the quality of thoughts you bring into your conversations today. The community you want is already being formed by the intentions moving through your words. This is why inner work is never selfish.
To purify the mind is not to disappear from the world. It is to stop releasing unnecessary suffering into the world through unexamined thought. It is to become safer for others, more trustworthy, less reactive, more able to love without control, more able to serve without pride, more able to speak without wounding. These are not small things. These are the foundations of a noble life. There is another misunderstanding that often appears in spiritual life. Some people believe that because outer actions matter, the inner state matters less. They think that if they donate, build, bow, chant, or serve in visible ways, then the work is done. The Buddha never rejected wholesome outer acts. Giving is beautiful. Supporting temples is beautiful. Caring for the Sangha is beautiful. Bowing with sincerity is beautiful. But he continually brought people back to the heart behind the act. A person may build a shrine and still be full of contempt. A person may offer flowers and still speak cruelly at home. A person may give money and still refuse kindness to the suffering person right in front of them. Another person may have no wealth to give, yet offer time, patience, and genuine compassion, and their life may become a true offering. So we should be careful not to fall into two extremes. One extreme says outer acts are everything. The other says outer acts mean nothing. The middle way is this: outer acts matter, but without inner transformation, they remain incomplete. Merit is not denied, but the deepest fruit comes when the mind is purified together with the action. There is a well-loved old image in Buddhist storytelling of a poor woman offering a tiny lamp, while the wealthy offer many grand lights. The poor woman's lamp is small, but it is lit with sincere faith and a whole heart. The richer offerings may be larger, but if they are mixed with display, competition, or vanity, something essential is missing. The story does not insult generosity. It reveals that the true brightness of an offering is not measured only by size, but by the quality of mind. This is very relevant today. A person posts every charitable act online and secretly thirsts for admiration. Another person quietly pays for a stranger's meal and tells no one. Outwardly, one act is visible and celebrated, the other unnoticed. But the law of the heart does not judge by applause. Again, this does not mean that visible giving is bad. Sometimes sharing good acts inspires others. Sometimes public generosity helps real causes. The real question remains, what are you feeding in the act? Vanity or compassion? Image or sincerity? Self-importance or humility? A man once visited a monastery and donated a large sum for repairs. Everyone thanked him. He smiled, but on the way home he felt strangely restless. Why did no one announce my name more clearly? Why did the abbot not personally walk me out? Why do people not understand how much I have done? That night he could not sleep. He kept replaying the event, not because he had given too much, but because the gift had been tied to hunger for recognition. He had offered money, but the mind had not yet learned to let go. In the same village, there was an elderly fruit seller with almost nothing. Each week, she set aside 2 ripe guavas and left them quietly at the monastery gate before dawn. No one knew it was her. When asked years later why she did this, she said, "Monks also get hungry, and I wish to practice remembering others before myself." That small act nourished not only the monks, it nourished her own heart. Day by day, she was becoming lighter. This is why the Buddha taught that intention is karma.
Not because the physical world does not matter, but because intention reveals what the action is doing to the heart of the doer. The same outward deed can shape the inner person in very different ways. Let us return to the question of the future. If day after day you keep feeding vanity, then even good deeds may strengthen self-centeredness. If day after day you keep feeding humility, then even ordinary duties become part of awakening. If day after day you keep feeding kindness, then slowly your presence becomes a refuge. People feel less afraid around you. Children feel more seen. Parents feel more cared for. Friends feel more rested. This too is karma. This too is the future taking shape. The Buddha did not ask us to abandon forms. He asked us not to worship forms while forgetting the heart. A bow without humility is only bending the body. A prayer without kindness is only sound. A donation without compassion is only transfer. But when the heart is pure, even a cup of water given to the thirsty becomes luminous. So if you have resources, use them well. Support what is wholesome. Give where suffering can be reduced. Build what can serve many. But while doing so, watch the mind carefully. Ask, am I also becoming softer? Am I also becoming less proud? Am I also becoming more patient with difficult people? Am I also becoming more truthful with myself? Because the deepest offering in Buddhism is not gold, not incense, not architecture. It is the transformation of greed, hatred, and delusion in the human heart. And that offering can be made every single day. Let us look now at one of the most painful places where thoughts shape the future: the family. Many people believe the family is damaged mainly by major betrayals or dramatic events. Sometimes that is true. But very often, families are slowly worn down by repeated thoughts that become repeated tones, repeated assumptions, repeated habits. A father thinks, "My son never listens." From that thought, he begins hearing only evidence that confirms it. Even when the child tries, he does not fully see it. The child feels unseen and gives up more easily. Then the father's thought seems proven. A mother thinks, "My daughter is ungrateful." With that lens, every silence becomes disrespect. Every mistake becomes proof of selfishness. The daughter feels judged and closes her heart further. Again, the thought appears confirmed. This is how unexamined thoughts can create the very future they fear. On the other hand, a parent may choose a more skillful thought. My child is still learning. My child also suffers. My child needs guidance, but not humiliation. This thought does not make the parent blind. It makes the parent wise. Correction can still happen. Discipline can still happen. But love remains in the room. The same is true between husband and wife. Many marriages do not collapse in one day. They are weakened by small inner sentences repeated over years. He does not care. She always complains. He never understands me. She only sees my faults. These thoughts may contain some truth, but when they are repeated without awareness, they harden into identity. Soon the partner is no longer being met freshly. They are being met through a wall of memory and resentment. A woman once came to a nun and said, "I do not think my husband is cruel, but when he speaks, my heart closes before he finishes the sentence." The nun asked, "When did your heart start closing?" The woman thought for a long time and then said, "I think it began years ago, when I decided in my mind that he would never change. Since then, even small efforts from him do not reach me. I no longer receive them. The nun nodded and said, "Sometimes the mind locks the door and then complains that no one is entering." This story is important. Some relationships truly need distance or protection,
But many can still be healed if the mind stops feeding hopeless stories and starts meeting the present with more honesty. The thought, "he never changes," may not be completely true. Perhaps he changes slowly, perhaps in small ways. Perhaps he fails often, but not always. If the mind leaves no room for reality, then even reality cannot help. There is also the suffering of children toward parents and parents toward children. In many homes, love exists, but it is buried under expectation. A son thinks, "My father never understood me." A father thinks, "My son does not respect all I sacrificed." Both may be carrying pain. Both may be right in part. But if each only feeds the thought of injury, then the future of the relationship becomes more injury. Sometimes healing begins not with agreement, but with a different thought. My father also had fears I never saw. My son also carries pressure I did not understand. Let me listen one more time without preparing my defense. That thought alone can soften the next conversation enough for something real to happen. A simple story can help. An elderly father grew slow and forgetful. At meals, he spilled rice, dropped his spoon, and repeated the same stories. His daughter, who cared for him, became increasingly irritated. Every day she thought, "Why is he making life harder? How many times must I hear this?" Though she never shouted, her face became cold. The father ate in silence. One afternoon, while cleaning an old cupboard, she found a little notebook from her childhood. In it were short notes written by her father. Today she fell and cried, but she smiled again after I carried her. Today she asked the same question 10 times, and I answered 10 times, because her little mind is still growing. Today I am tired, but I must be gentle, because she is still so small. Reading those lines, a different thought rose in her. Now my father is the one who has become slow and small in this world. Can I not answer him 10 times as he once answered me? The task did not become physically easier, but love returned to the action. Her future with her father changed from burden to gratitude. This is the power of thought. It can turn care into resentment, or care into devotion. It can turn relationship into battlefield, or relationship into practice. It can make a home feel like a prison, or like a place where beings slowly learn to forgive each other. So if you wish for a different future in your family, do not look only at everyone else's faults. Begin by watching the thoughts with which you are meeting the people you love. The next tone of your voice is already being born there. Another place where the future is silently shaped is in the way we speak to ourselves. Many people understand that harsh thoughts toward others bring suffering, but they do not notice the violence with which they think about themselves. A woman makes one mistake at work and thinks, "I am useless." A student fails one exam and thinks, "I will never be enough." A parent loses patience one evening and thinks, "I am a terrible person." A person growing older looks in the mirror and thinks, "I am becoming unworthy because I am no longer admired." These thoughts are often spoken inwardly many times each day. Slowly, they become a climate of shame. The Buddha did not teach self-hatred. He taught clear seeing. Clear seeing can recognize fault,
but it does not add cruelty. It can acknowledge error, but it does not turn error into identity. It knows the difference between saying, "That action was unskillful," and saying, "I am beyond redemption." The first opens the door to responsibility. The second often closes the door to growth. Why does this matter for the future? Because a mind soaked in shame tends to move in one of two directions. Either it collapses and stops trying, or it seeks constant proof of worth from the outside. In both cases, freedom is lost. There was a young man who wanted to meditate, but every time he sat down, he was flooded by memories of the harm he had done in earlier years. He had lied, wasted money, hurt people who trusted him. Each memory gave rise to the thought, "Someone like me does not deserve peace." So he kept living in agitation. He believed that torment was honesty. At last, he spoke with a teacher. The teacher listened and then asked, "If a man falls into mud, should he lie there forever to prove that the mud is real? Or should he wash and learn to walk more carefully?" The young man wept. He had mistaken self-punishment for wisdom. The Buddha's path includes remorse when remorse is appropriate. But wholesome remorse is not endless self-beating. It is the courage to admit harm, the willingness to make amends where possible, and the commitment not to repeat the same unskillful patterns. After that, one must continue walking. Otherwise, the mind merely circles around the self. This is why compassionate attention toward one's own mind matters. Not indulgence, not excuse-making. Compassion. The recognition that this human life is difficult, that conditioning is strong, that ignorance has many forms, and that awakening takes patience. Imagine a gardener who wants to help a bent young tree grow straight. She does not scream at the tree. She supports it. She protects it from strong wind. She waters it regularly. She corrects gently, steadily, over time. Why do so many of us imagine that the mind becomes noble by being hated? If you wake each day feeding the thought, "I am broken beyond repair," your future will be shaped by avoidance, fear, and exhaustion. If instead you feed the thought, "I have causes of suffering in me, but I can practice, learn, and begin again," your future opens. A monk once described the mind as a child lost in a crowded marketplace. If you shout at the child, it becomes more frightened. If you guide the child kindly and firmly, it can come home. Many of our own minds are like this, lost in noise, lost in craving, lost in fear. The practice is to guide them home. There is also the danger of spiritual pride here. Some people are harsh with themselves because they are secretly attached to an image of perfection. They do not merely want to be honest, they want to be spotless, admired, superior. So when they discover ordinary human weakness, they turn against themselves violently. But humility says, "Of course, there is still greed, anger, and delusion in me. That is why I practice. Not to build a holy self, but to become more free and more kind." As you shape your future, please remember this. The thoughts you hold about yourself matter. If those thoughts are lazy, they weaken you. If those thoughts are vain, they blind you. If those thoughts are cruel, they wound you. But if those thoughts are truthful and compassionate, they strengthen the path. Speak inwardly in a way that helps the heart become more awake. Admit what is unskillful. Bow to the truth. But do not keep planting thorns in the same place and calling it discipline. The Buddha's way is firm and gentle at once. It cuts through delusion, but it does not despise the one who is trying to wake up. There is a teaching, often repeated in many forms across Buddhist traditions. What you repeatedly contemplate, that your mind inclines toward. The mind follows the grooves it uses most often. This is why repetition is powerful. Not only repetition of action, but repetition of thought. A person who repeatedly thinks of revenge becomes skilled at finding reasons to stay angry. A person who repeatedly thinks of desire becomes skilled at dissatisfaction. A person who repeatedly thinks of gratitude becomes skilled at noticing blessings. A person who repeatedly thinks of death becomes more careful with time. A person who repeatedly thinks of compassion becomes less interested in wounding others. We become familiar with the rooms we visit most often in the mind. So let us ask a very practical question. What do you visit all day? Do you visit complaint, comparison, fantasy, suspicion, regret, pride, fear? Or do you visit steadiness, kindness, humility, understanding, and remembrance? This is not abstract spirituality. This is daily architecture. In many modern lives, the mind is trained by distraction and reaction. A person wakes and immediately enters a stream of news, images, arguments, and desires. Before the day has truly begun, the heart is already pulled in 10 directions. Someone else's beauty creates self-doubt. Someone else's success creates restlessness. Someone else's anger creates anger. Hours pass with hardly any conscious choosing. Then at night, the same person says, "I want peace." Of course they do. But what atmosphere did the mind breathe all day? The Buddha lived long before smartphones, but he understood the nature of contact. What the senses keep meeting, the mind keeps processing. What the mind keeps processing, it keeps becoming inclined toward. This is why guarding the senses is not a rejection of life. It is wise care for the heart. If you fill the mind with contemptuous voices, do not be surprised when contempt becomes easy. If you keep feeding on envy, do not be surprised when joy becomes difficult. If you surround yourself with agitation, do not be surprised when stillness feels unnatural. The future is not only built by dramatic choices, it is built by what the mind keeps grazing on every day. A traveling merchant once stayed in 2 houses on 2 different journeys. In the first house, people constantly complained. They criticized neighbors, mocked the poor, envied the rich, and spoke harshly even at mealtime. After 3 days, the merchant found his own mind becoming sharp and restless. In the second house, the family was not wealthy, but they spoke with warmth. They thanked one another for small efforts. They did not gossip. They kept a little corner for evening silence. After 3 days there, the merchant felt an unexpected peace. Later, he said, "I thought I was merely staying in their homes, but I was also staying in their mental worlds." This story is true for all of us. We become like what we dwell among, outwardly and inwardly. So if you want a different future, be careful what mental world you enter repeatedly. This includes the stories you tell yourself. Some people tell themselves the same story for 20 years. I was wronged, therefore I cannot heal. I failed once, therefore I should not try. I was unloved there, therefore I am unlovable everywhere. These thoughts may feel true because they are old, but age does not make a thought wise. Sometimes age only makes a prison familiar. The Buddha invites us to question such stories with compassion. Is this truly the whole truth? Is this thought leading to freedom or more bondage? Is this thought rooted in wisdom or in wounded habit? Do I want my future built on this sentence? Imagine carrying a jar filled with dark water and adding 1 drop of black ink each day. You may say, it is only 1 drop. But over time, the whole jar becomes difficult to see through. The same is true of mind. A small daily bitterness, a small daily lie, a small daily contempt, a small daily greed, all gradually color perception. On the other hand, a small daily act of recollection, a small daily bow of gratitude, a small daily refusal to speak harm. These also gather. Clarity also accumulates. So do not underestimate repetition. The future is often not won in a moment of intensity. It is shaped in the ordinary faithfulness of what you practice again and again. Now let us return to the story of the merchants with even deeper attention. Many people hear such stories and focus only on the outer outcome. One man prospers, another meets misfortune. But if we stop there, we may miss the subtlety of the Buddha's point. The deepest karma was not merely in what happened afterward. It was already alive in the quality of consciousness present at the moment of seeing. When the first merchant beheld the Buddha with reverence, his mind opened. Reverence is not blind worship. At its best, reverence is the mind recognizing something higher than its own vanity. In that moment, self-importance softens. The heart becomes teachable. It becomes capable of receiving. This itself is a blessing. A person who can respect goodness is already closer to goodness. When the second merchant looked with mockery, his mind closed. Mockery often arises from insecurity and pride mixed together. It cannot bear to bow. It cannot bear to feel small before wisdom. So it attacks what it secretly fears. In that state, learning becomes difficult. Grace is near, yet cannot enter because the door is locked from inside. This can happen in very ordinary ways. A person hears sound advice from a loved one. If the mind is humble, the advice may help them. If the mind is proud, the same advice feels insulting. A patient meets a doctor. If the mind is open, treatment can begin. If the mind is stubborn, healing is delayed. A student meets a teacher. If the mind is respectful, knowledge flows. If the mind is cynical, the teaching remains outside like rain on stone. So one deep lesson from the merchant story is this. Future blessing depends not only on what comes toward us, but on the kind of mind that receives it. How many opportunities for healing pass through our lives unnoticed because pride is standing at the gate? A woman receives a sincere apology, but because she has fed injury for so long, her mind says, it is too late, or he is only pretending. Maybe sometimes this is true, but sometimes it is the old wound refusing to loosen. A man is offered guidance on his health, yet his mind says, no one can tell me what to do. A son is invited to reconcile with his father, but his mind says, if I forgive, I become weak. So the future stays frozen, not because the possibility was absent, but because the heart was not yet ready. The Buddha valued humility, because humility makes transformation possible. Not humiliation, humility. The quiet willingness to see that our view may be incomplete, our reactions may be conditioned, our judgments may be clouded. Humility says, let me look again. Let me listen more deeply. Let me not worship my first thought. This is especially important in a culture that often rewards quick opinions and strong reactions. The ego loves certainty. It loves immediate judgment. It loves being the center of the story. But awakening is not centered around the ego's speed. It flowers in careful seeing. There is a small story of a scholar who visited an old meditation master. The scholar spoke for a long time about sutras, philosophy, and all the schools of thought he had mastered. The old master listened, then quietly poured tea into the scholar's cup until it overflowed. The scholar exclaimed, "Stop! The cup is full." The master replied, "So is your mind. How can tea enter?" Whether or not the story happened exactly as told matters less than the truth inside it. A full mind cannot receive. A proud mind cannot bow. A mocking mind cannot learn. The future of wisdom depends on whether there is room in us for wisdom to enter. This is why even the first movement of respect matters. To respect goodness is already to turn toward it. To delight in truth is already to align with it. To honor compassion is already to invite it into oneself. In that sense, the first merchant's blessing began immediately. His thought was not merely about the Buddha, it was already changing him. And the warning is also clear. To scorn what is noble is to become further estranged from nobility. To ridicule what is pure is to deepen one's own confusion. The punishment is not imposed from outside, like a king's order. The punishment is built into the state itself. Contempt is dark. Pride is lonely. Mockery dries the heart. So when you notice resistance to goodness, do not be ashamed, but do look carefully. What is threatened in you when you see something pure? What becomes uncomfortable when you stand before true humility, true love, true discipline, true wisdom? Sometimes that discomfort is exactly where practice must begin. The mind that can bow is the mind that can grow. Because thoughts matter so deeply, one of the most compassionate things the Buddha ever taught is the practice of stopping. Not suppression, not denial. Stopping. When a harmful thought begins rising, the untrained mind usually does one of two things. It indulges the thought and follows it wherever it leads. Or it fights the thought violently and becomes entangled with it in another way. The middle path is to stop and know, to pause, to breathe, to see clearly what is happening without immediately becoming it. This sounds simple, but it can change entire lives. A husband hears his wife mention an old mistake. Instantly, he feels shame and anger. The mind says, "She never lets anything go. Why should I listen? Say something sharp. End this now." If he moves at the speed of that thought, suffering multiplies. But if he has learned to stop, even for 3 breaths, another possibility appears. Pain is here. Defensiveness is here. But I do not have to pour this into the room. Let me listen first. In that pause, the future bends. A teenager is excluded by friends and thinks, "No one really wants me. I should act like I do not care. I should cut them off first." If that thought is fed again and again, loneliness deepens into identity. But if someone helps the teenager stop and see, hurt is here, but it is not the whole truth. Let us not build a life from one painful afternoon. Then a door remains open. Stopping is not weakness, Stopping is strength refusing to be hijacked. There was an old ferryman who carried people across a wide river. One season, the water was rough and many travelers were anxious.
A young man boarded in anger after fighting with his brother. Halfway across, he started cursing loudly and kicking a sack of grain beside him, imagining it was his brother's face. The ferryman said nothing until they reached the shore. Then he took the young man aside and pointed to the river. He said, "If you fall into that water, what saves you first?" The young man said, "Holding still enough to breathe." The ferryman nodded. The heart is the same in anger. If you thrash wildly, you go under faster. This is why the Buddha praised mindfulness joined with clear comprehension. Not merely noticing, but understanding. Not merely being present, but knowing what state is present, what nourishes it, what weakens it, and where it leads if followed. We can ask a few very practical questions in the moment of stopping. What am I feeling right now? What thought is feeding it? Is this thought fully true? If I follow this thought, where will it lead? Will this create peace or more suffering? Is there a wiser thought available? These questions are like opening windows in a room that has become stale. Sometimes the wiser thought is very simple. This person is suffering too. I am tired and should not speak yet. This is only one moment, not the whole story. I do not need to win this argument. I can return later. Let me not make permanent decisions inside temporary pain. Even if the difficult situation remains, the mind has shifted from possession to participation. Instead of being dragged, it is now awake. That changes everything. There is also another form of stopping that is very beautiful. Stopping before something wholesome. Stopping to notice a tree moving in the wind. Stopping to thank the person who cooked your meal. Stopping to feel tenderness when your child is asleep. Stopping to remember that your parents will not be here forever. Stopping to witness the miracle that you still have time to practice. These pauses also shape the future because they train the mind in gratitude and presence. A life without stopping becomes mechanical. We react, consume, compare, speak, and rush, but do not really live. A life with stopping begins to recover depth. We start seeing what we are doing while we are doing it. We become less dangerous to ourselves and others. We become less likely to spend a whole year trapped in a thought we never examined. So if you remember nothing else from this reflection, remember this. When a thought rises, stop. Know it. Breathe with it. Do not rush to serve it. In that small pause lives a freedom much greater than most people realize. Your future may change, not because you fought every thought, but because you stopped obeying all of them. Among the many thoughts that shape a life, few are more powerful than resentment. Resentment is grief mixed with anger and kept alive by repetition. It is the mind returning to injury again and again, polishing the memory until it becomes part of identity. A resentful thought may feel justified, and sometimes it arises from real harm. Yet even when the original wound was true, the repeated feeding of resentment creates a second suffering. The Buddha did not ask people to pretend they had not been hurt. He did not ask them to call evil good, but he repeatedly pointed out that hatred never ends through hatred. It ends through the absence of hatred. This is not sentimental. It is practical. If you keep drinking resentment,
You keep the wound wet. It cannot close. A man may have been betrayed by a friend. For years he tells himself, "I will never forgive." He may think he is protecting himself, but what he often protects is a prison. The betrayer may have moved on, changed, or even suffered deeply for their own actions. Meanwhile, the injured man keeps meeting the world through the same suspicion. New friendships are harder. Sleep is less clean. The body carries tension. The future gets built around an old injury. Now let us be careful. Forgiveness in the Buddhist sense does not always mean returning to the same closeness. It does not mean trusting the untrustworthy without wisdom. It means releasing the mind from the continuous desire to replay, punish, and define oneself by the wound. It means refusing to let another person's ignorance become the ruler of one's own heart. A nun once cared for an elderly villager who had spent many years speaking bitterly about a brother who cheated him in an inheritance dispute. The villager was not rich. The land mattered. The wound was real. Near the end of his life, he said to the nun, "I still think about that land almost every day." The nun asked, "And on which day did the land begin thinking about you?" He laughed through tears. In that moment, he understood. For decades, he had given life energy to a field of earth that could never return a single breath. The Buddha's teaching does not deny justice, but it asks, what are you turning into while waiting for the world to be fair? Are you becoming wiser or harder? Clearer or more bitter? More compassionate or more defined by injury? There is a story of a woman who carried a stone in her apron each time she thought of someone who had hurt her. At first, it was a private ritual of memory. One stone for a sister who mocked her, one for a neighbor who lied, one for a former friend. Over the years, the apron became heavy. One day, an old monk saw her struggling and asked what she was carrying. She showed him the stones proudly as evidence that she had not forgotten. The monk said, "You remember them well, but do you remember your own back? It is breaking." This is what resentment does. It asks us to prove we were hurt by carrying the hurt forever. The future changes when the mind begins to choose differently. This does not happen by command. It happens gradually, sometimes painfully. A person may begin with a very small thought. Perhaps I do not want to be chained to this forever. Perhaps I can wish to be free even before I feel ready to forgive. Perhaps I can stop rehearsing the story every night. Perhaps I can acknowledge the hurt without building a shrine to it. That small thought is already a seed of liberation. The Buddha often encouraged contemplation of common humanity. This person who harmed me is also shaped by ignorance, craving, and fear. This does not excuse the harm, but it prevents us from imagining that evil comes from some separate species. We too, when clouded, have caused pain. We too have spoken from blindness. Seeing this, hatred softens into sober understanding. Some of the deepest peace in human life arrives when the heart stops negotiating with the past and begins to inhabit the present more fully. Not because the past did not matter, but because one sees that the future does matter too. Must the wound be your master for another 10 years? Another 20? Must the betrayal become the lens through which your children know you? Must every new love pay for an old injury? The Buddha's answer is gentle but firm. No, it does not have to be that way. But freedom begins in thought. In the thought that says, "Let me not continue this fire. Let me not keep worshiping pain. Let me learn another way. If you have such a wound, begin where you are. Do not force sweetness. Simply stop feeding the poison as often. That is already mercy. That is already wisdom. There is a special danger in spiritual life that must be spoken of plainly. Sometimes people use spiritual ideas to avoid honest self-examination. They say all is karma, so they do not take responsibility. They say I am practicing acceptance, when in truth, they are avoiding necessary courage. They say thoughts create the future, and then blame every suffering person for their pain. This is not the Buddha's teaching. It is a distortion. Karma is profound and complex. Not every event in a life can be reduced to one recent thought. There are old conditions, social conditions, bodily conditions, collective conditions, and much we cannot see. The Buddha did not teach us to become simplistic judges. He taught us to become more responsible for the mind we are using now. So when we say, your future depends on your thoughts, we do not mean that thought is a magic trick that instantly controls the whole universe. We mean that the quality of thought profoundly conditions how you speak, how you act, how you interpret, what habits you strengthen, what relationships you build, and how much suffering or peace you carry. Thought is not the only cause, but it is one of the nearest causes to the life you are living. This matters because people often swing into extremes. One extreme says nothing can change because everything is fixed. The other says everything can change instantly if I just think positively. The Buddha's path is subtler. Causes matter. Effort matters. Conditions matter. Patience matters. Repetition matters. Right understanding matters. The future unfolds through many interwoven forces, but the mind is one of the most intimate among them. A farmer cannot command rain, but he can prepare the soil. He can remove stones. He can choose the seed. He can water when possible. He can protect the young shoots. If drought comes, he still suffers its effect. Yet his preparation was not meaningless. In the same way, you cannot control everything life will bring, but you can cultivate the ground of the mind. Then when joy comes, you know how to receive it without clinging. When sorrow comes, you know how to meet it without collapsing into hatred. There was a woman who lost her small business after a sudden flood. For months, she repeated one thought: my life is over. This thought drained her strength. She neglected help that was offered. She pushed away friends. She stopped eating regularly. Another woman in the same village also suffered loss in the flood. She cried deeply and did not deny her pain. But she fed a different thought. This is terrible, but I am still alive, and I must begin from where my feet are. She borrowed tools, accepted help, and rebuilt slowly. Both women suffered, but one thought led toward paralysis, the other toward courage. The Buddha is not asking us to lie. He is asking us to choose truthful thoughts that support freedom rather than delusion that deepens pain. My life is over may feel emotionally true in a moment, but often it is not fact. This is painful and difficult, but I can take the next step is often more honest and more useful. This is why right view matters. Right view means seeing clearly the lawfulness of causes and effects, the impermanent nature of conditions, the unsatisfactory nature of clinging, and the possibility of release. Without right view, even good intentions can wander into confusion. With right view, thoughts become wiser,
and wise thoughts produce wiser action. Please do not use this teaching to judge the poor, the sick, the grieving, or yourself in cruel ways. Use it to become more awake to the mind you are feeding now. Use it to interrupt harmful patterns. Use it to cultivate compassion. Use it to understand why some inner habits keep recreating outer suffering. Use it to free the heart from helplessness, not to burden it with superstition. When the Buddha pointed to the mind, he was giving back dignity and responsibility. He was saying, even in a world of change and uncertainty, there is a place where practice is possible. There is a place where freedom can begin. There is a place where seeds can be chosen. That place is here. If these reflections are helping you breathe a little more deeply, you may quietly support Buddha Peaceful Mind by subscribing and sharing this teaching with someone who may need a softer, wiser way to meet their own thoughts. Sometimes, a single teaching reaches a person at the right hour and prevents years of unnecessary suffering. May this be such an hour for someone. Let us now consider one of the most practical Buddhist disciplines for transforming the future: guarding the doorway of the senses. What enters the eye enters the mind. What enters the ear enters the mind. What repeatedly enters the mind begins to influence what comes out of the mouth, the body, and the heart. In ancient times, this meant being careful with the company one kept, the stories one heard, the sights one indulged in, the conversations one joined. Today, the principle is even more urgent. Many people open their eyes in the morning and immediately begin feeding themselves anxiety, desire, outrage, comparison, and noise. Before breakfast, the mind may already be burning. This is not a call to fear the world. It is a call to understand digestion. Just as the body is affected by what it consumes, the mind is affected by what it consumes. If you consume endless images designed to provoke craving, do not be surprised when contentment weakens. If you consume endless conflict, do not be surprised when the heart becomes irritable. If you consume endless mockery, do not be surprised when reverence fades. A young office worker once asked a teacher, "Why is my meditation becoming more agitated even though I sit every evening?" The teacher asked how he spent the rest of the day. The young man laughed awkwardly. He admitted that he spent hours scrolling through arguments, gossip, and glamorous images that left him feeling inadequate. The teacher said, "You are pouring dust into the pond all day and asking why the water is cloudy at night." This image is worth remembering. Many of us are pouring dust into the mind all day. Then when we cannot feel peace, we think peace has abandoned us. But often, peace is still there, waiting beneath the sediment. Guarding the senses does not mean rigid withdrawal from the world. It means wise selection. It means asking, does this contact strengthen greed, hatred, and delusion? Or does it support clarity, kindness, and understanding? Does this conversation make me more truthful or more petty? Does this form of entertainment leave the heart lighter or more restless? Does this environment nourish my best mind or train my worst habits? You do not have to become severe. Even small changes can alter the future. A few minutes of silence in the morning before touching a device, choosing not to read comments written in cruelty, listening to a teaching instead of an argument while commuting, taking a walk without constant input, looking at the sky long enough to remember that the mind is not meant to be crowded every second. There is also the company of people, The Buddha spoke often of admirable friendship because those around us influence what thoughts become normal. Spend enough time with people who gossip, and gossip begins feeling natural. Spend enough time with people who live honestly, and honesty begins feeling possible. Spend enough time with people who are grateful, and gratitude awakens in you more easily. A carpenter once worked with two crews in different seasons. One crew complained from dawn to dusk. Even when business was good, they found new reasons to be bitter. The other crew worked hard too, but they helped one another and laughed without cruelty. At the end of the year, the carpenter said, "I earned wages in both places, but in one place I lost part of my heart, and in the other, I regained it." This is why spiritual friendship matters. We do not always choose every environment, but we can choose what voices receive authority in the mind. We can choose what we turn toward when tired, lonely, or confused. Suppose every day you feed the mind contemptuous media, cynical talk, and endless comparison. These are seeds. Suppose instead you feed the mind moments of stillness, teachings on wisdom, acts of service, and contact with nature. These too are seeds. The future that grows from one field will not feel the same as the future that grows from the other. If your thoughts shape your future, then your inputs help shape your thoughts. Guarding the senses is therefore not a secondary practice. It is part of the path of compassion toward oneself. It is refusing to let the mind be treated like a public trash ground where anyone may throw anything. Make your mind a place worthy of peace. Then peace will find it easier to stay. A profound sign of inner maturity is the ability to see that a thought is not always the truth of things. It may be a perception colored by fear. It may be an old wound coloring the present. It may be desire exaggerating what it wants. It may be pride protecting itself. The Buddha taught investigation because awakening requires more than noticing. It requires seeing clearly. Imagine standing at dusk and mistaking a rope for a snake. The body reacts. Fear is real. Sweat may appear. The heart may race. Yet the snake is not real. The reaction was conditioned by misperception. In the same way, many thoughts that govern human life are built on partial seeing. She did not smile, so she must dislike me. He is quiet, so he must be judging me. They did not invite me, so I must not matter. I made a mistake, so I am a failure. I was hurt before, so love is dangerous. These thoughts can feel convincing, yet often they are ropes mistaken for snakes. The Buddha did not teach blind optimism. He taught wise examination. Come and see. Look again. Do not believe something merely because it feels strong. Look at causes. Look at effects. Look at whether the thought brings freedom or contraction. A school teacher noticed that one of her students had become withdrawn and disrespectful. The teacher thought, "This child has become lazy and arrogant." She felt offended and began treating him coldly. Weeks later, she learned that the boy's father had been hospitalized, and the child had been sleeping very little while helping care for younger siblings. In that moment, the teacher saw how one thought had shaped weeks of interaction. The child's behavior was difficult, yes, but the meaning she attached to it was incomplete. A wiser thought would have created a different future for both of them. How often do we do this in daily life? We take one fragment of behavior and build a whole character out of it. We take one painful event and build a whole future out of it. We take one opinion and build a whole enemy out of it.
Then we live inside a world partly created by misinterpretation.
This is why the Buddha emphasized seeing things as they are, not as we fear, not as we crave, not as ego narrates, as they are. One helpful practice is to ask, what else might be true? This question creates breathing space. He may be quiet because he is tired, not because he hates me. I may feel rejected because I am sensitive today, not because I am truly rejected. This situation may be difficult, but it may still contain something I need to learn. I may not yet know the whole story. Such thoughts are not weak. They are humble. They keep the mind from locking itself into unnecessary suffering. A merchant once lost a valuable shipment and thought, I am ruined. In despair, he almost sold his remaining tools for almost nothing. An older trader told him, do not make decisions while your mind is naming the whole sky from one cloud. The merchant waited. In time, he discovered that a delayed payment, long believed impossible, was still coming. And his situation, while difficult, was not the total destruction he had imagined. One thought had almost turned temporary hardship into lasting disaster. The future changes when investigation enters the mind. Investigation interrupts blind momentum. It asks, is this thought skillful? Is it accurate? Is it complete? Does it align with reality? If I believe it fully, what kind of person will I become? This is especially important when the thought concerns identity. I am unlovable. I am always unlucky. I am naturally angry. I can never change. These are often not truths, but conclusions formed from repeated pain. When such thoughts are believed, they become self-fulfilling. We stop opening. We stop trying. We keep living as if the sentence were sacred. The Buddha would gently challenge this. Everything conditioned can change. Habits can change. Hearts can change. Perception can change. Even long-standing suffering can be understood and transformed. To see a thought clearly is to loosen its spell. To loosen its spell is to open the future. This is one of the great freedoms of the path. There is a noble thought that appears again and again in the Buddha's teaching, and it has the power to transform almost every area of life. It is the thought of non-harming. Before I speak, may I not harm. Before I act, may I not harm. Before I continue this line of thinking, may I not harm myself or others with it. This may sound simple, but it goes very deep. Harm begins in the mind before it reaches the tongue or the hand. A person keeps replaying another's fault. Harm is already growing. A person keeps fantasizing about gain at someone else's expense. Harm is already growing. A person keeps speaking inwardly to themselves with contempt. Harm is already growing. By the time action appears, the seed has already been watered many times. The Buddha's path of non-harming is not merely moral restraint. It is a refinement of perception. We begin to sense more quickly when a thought is poisoning the heart. We begin to notice the difference between firmness and aggression, between wise caution and suspicion, between truth and cruelty. A physician in a small town became known not only for medicine, but for the way she spoke. Even with difficult patients, she remained calm and clear. A young assistant asked how she stayed so gentle under pressure. The physician replied, "I do not always feel gentle at first, but before I speak, I ask one question. Will this add pain, or will this help carry pain?"
That question changes my mind before it changes my words. This is very close to Buddhist practice. When the mind is about to move, ask, where will this go if I follow it? What future does this thought create in this room? Many people regret words spoken in one angry minute more than actions taken in a whole day. Why? Because speech enters the hearts of others. It lingers. It shapes memory. A child may forget dozens of meals, but remember one sentence of humiliation for years. A spouse may survive many hardships, but the memory of contempt can remain long after the event. A friend may forgive slowly, but the wound of betrayal in speech cuts deeply. If thoughts shape speech, then guarding thought is already an act of love. There was once a grandmother who lived with 3 generations under one roof. She had seen much of life and did not speak often. When arguments rose in the household, she would sometimes hold a cup of water in her hand and say nothing until the room became quieter. Then she would ask, "If this cup is already full, can I add more without spilling?" The family knew what she meant. A heart full of anger cannot receive more heat without overflowing into harm. First, let the water settle, then speak. What a wise image. So many of our conversations happen while the cup is full. The mind is full of old hurt, fatigue, insecurity, or fear, and still we proceed as though our thoughts are trustworthy in that moment. The result is predictable. We say things that are partly true but badly timed or completely unnecessary. The future of the relationship is affected. A thought of non-harming can interrupt this. Let me wait. Let me lower the fire first. Let me remember the humanity of this person. Let me not say the sentence that cannot be called back. This does not make us passive or dishonest. In fact, it often makes us more courageous because we are no longer using anger as our source of energy. We can say difficult things without losing ourselves. We can protect what matters without becoming what we oppose. The future of communities, marriages, workplaces, and friendships depends greatly on how many people are willing to practice non-harming at the level of thought. Imagine how different a home would feel if even one person consistently chose not to keep feeding stories that inflame conflict. Imagine how different the internet would feel if more people asked whether their next thought and word were rooted in helpfulness or merely in the thrill of striking. The Buddha's way is radical because it begins so close to where suffering starts. Not after harm is done, at the very edge where a thought is becoming a direction. There, with awareness, we may choose another path. If thoughts shape the future, then one of the most life-giving thoughts we can practice is gratitude. Gratitude is not denial of pain. It is not the refusal to acknowledge injustice or grief. It is the ability to remain in touch with goodness, even while life is imperfect. This protects the heart from becoming blind. An ungrateful mind can stand in the middle of blessings and still feel deprived. A grateful mind can stand in difficulty and still discover support. The facts of life may be complex, but gratitude changes how they are held. Consider how a day begins. One person wakes and immediately thinks, another hard day, another burden, nothing is enough. The body becomes heavy before the feet reach the floor. Another person wakes and thinks, I am still breathing. There is still time to do some good. Even if the day is hard, let me not begin by cursing it. This second thought does not solve all problems, but it places the mind in a very different relationship to life.
The Buddha often encouraged recollection as a wholesome support. Recollection of the Buddha, of the Dharma, of noble qualities, of generosity, of loving kindness, of death, of the preciousness of practice. These recollections lift the mind because they turn attention toward what is meaningful instead of leaving it to wander wherever habit wants. A delivery driver once spent years complaining internally about his work. Traffic, weather, schedules, customers, wages, all became causes for resentment. One rainy afternoon, he had to deliver food to a hospital. He passed through a hallway where families were waiting outside intensive care rooms. He saw exhaustion, fear, and tenderness on their faces. As he returned to his vehicle, a different thought appeared. I am tired, yes, but I am still healthy enough to stand, walk, and work. From that day, his job was still demanding, but his heart began to change. He had not gained a better route. He had gained a better perspective. Gratitude also softens entitlement. Entitlement is the thought that life owes me comfort, recognition, ease, or constant agreement. When reality fails to obey, anger rises quickly. Gratitude says something different. This meal did not appear by itself. These clothes were sewn by hands I may never know. This language was taught to me. This body was once carried by others. Even my understanding depends on teachings given by people before me. Such reflection humbles the heart and makes kindness more natural. There is a small story of a monk who was given a rough old bowl after his beautiful bowl cracked. At first, he felt disappointed. Then each morning he looked at the rough bowl and thought, this still holds enough food to sustain practice. Over time, he came to love it more than the earlier bowl. Not because it was more beautiful, but because gratitude had made use itself beautiful. How many people miss the sacred because they are waiting for perfection? How many reject ordinary goodness because it is not dramatic enough? A parent's steady presence, a friend's simple text asking if you arrived home safely, rice on the table, water that runs clean, a quiet hour before dawn, the ability to sit and listen, the chance to begin again after a mistake. These things are not small when seen with a clear mind. Gratitude shapes the future because it protects us from the endless hunger of craving. A mind that never says enough will always feel poor. A mind that can recognize enough becomes capable of contentment. Contentment does not kill aspiration. It removes the poison from aspiration. One can still work, learn, serve, and improve without believing that happiness lives only in the next achievement. To feed gratitude is therefore to feed peace. Not complete enlightenment by itself, but peace. A calmer future, a softer home, a more generous character, a mind less likely to wound others in the name of its own dissatisfaction. If you wish to begin simply, each day remember 3 things that are quietly supporting your life. Not glamorous things only. Perhaps the person who prepares tea for you, the tree outside your window, the teacher whose words still guide you, the parent who once endured much for you, the body that, despite pain, still carries you. A grateful thought is not weak. It is a lamp. And lamps change the feeling of a whole room. There are times when the future seems to close in on us. We become afraid. What if I fail? What if I lose this person? What if I get sick? What if there is not enough money?
What if I am left behind? Fear is a powerful force in the mind, and if it is not understood, it begins quietly shaping many decisions. The Buddha never mocked fear. He understood that human life includes uncertainty. Bodies age, conditions change, loved ones separate. Security is never complete. But he also saw that fear often creates suffering twice. Once in imagination, and again in reality. Many people live under a rain that has not yet fallen. A thought of fear can be useful if it points to wise care. If you fear harming others, you may become more ethical. If you fear wasting your life, you may practice more sincerely. If you fear illness, you may care for the body. But most fear is not like this. Most fear circles without clarity. It drains strength without offering wisdom. A young mother worried constantly about her child. If the child coughed, she imagined disaster. If the child was late from school, she imagined danger. If the child looked unhappy, she imagined a ruined future. Outwardly, she looked loving. Inwardly, she was always braced. The child began to absorb this atmosphere and became anxious too. One day, an older neighbor, also a mother, said gently, "You are trying to protect your child with fear, but fear is entering the child through you. Protect with care, yes, but not with endless frightening thoughts." The younger mother cried because she knew it was true. Fear says, control everything. Wisdom says, care well for what you can and meet what comes with presence. Fear says, imagine every worst outcome. Wisdom says, return to the step under your foot. Fear says, without certainty, I cannot rest. Wisdom says, certainty was never fully available. Learn steadiness instead. There is a beautiful discipline in Buddhism called returning to the present. This is not because the present is always easy. It is because the present is where life can actually be met. Fear often drags us into futures that do not yet exist. Then we suffer shadows and call them reality. A man waiting for test results spent 10 days convinced he would die soon. In those 10 days, he could not taste food, receive affection, or see the sky. He had already buried himself in imagination. When the results came, the condition was treatable. He later said, I suffered the illness before I had it, and more severely than the illness itself. This does not mean he should not have cared. It means fear had stolen life that was still available. The thought that transforms fear is not always, everything will be fine. That is not always true. Sometimes the wiser thought is, whatever comes, let me meet it with awareness. Or, this moment is here. Let me live this moment fully, instead of abandoning it to imagination. Or, fear is speaking, but fear is not the whole truth. Or, many beings live with uncertainty. Let me be kind to this trembling heart. Such thoughts do not erase vulnerability. They restore dignity within vulnerability. The Buddha often urged recollection of impermanence, not to depress us, but to sober and awaken us. Because everything changes. Clinging is painful, yes. But because everything changes, fear does not deserve complete authority either. This present difficulty will shift. This emotion will shift. This body will shift. This season will shift. In impermanence, there is also release. If you let fearful thoughts rule every day, the future becomes smaller. You avoid love because loss may come.
You avoid service because failure may come. You avoid honesty because conflict may come. You avoid practice because the results are not immediate. Fear keeps life narrow. The Buddha's path does not remove all risk. It teaches us how not to worship fear. Sometimes courage begins with one quiet thought. I do not know what will happen, but I do not want fear to choose my life for me. That thought has changed many destinies. The Buddha placed great emphasis on generosity, and generosity begins long before the hand opens. It begins in thought. A generous act is often born from the thought, let there be enough for another. Let someone else also be relieved. Let me not live only for myself. Without this shift in the mind, giving may become mechanical or even resentful. Greed also begins in thought. It begins in the inner sentence, mine, not enough, more for me. Why should I share? Even when a greedy person gives, the mind may calculate, compare, or expect. Therefore, generosity is not measured only by the object given, but by the release that happens within the giver. A poor farmer once harvested only a small amount of rice after a difficult season. As he measured it out, he knew there would be little to spare. At that moment, a hungry traveler passed by. The farmer felt conflict in the mind. One thought said, if I share, my family may have less. Another thought said, if I hold too tightly, my heart will become smaller than this field. He gave the traveler a bowl of rice and later told his wife with concern. She listened quietly and said, tonight we may eat less, but our children will sleep in a home where kindness is still alive. That is also food. The future of that family was shaped not merely by the bowl given, but by the kind of heart they protected through scarcity. This is important because many people postpone goodness until abundance comes. When I have more time, I will serve. When I have more money, I will give. When life is easier, I will be kind. But the Buddha's path often begins with what is possible now. A smile, a seat offered, a patient response, a sincere apology, a meal shared, a burden helped. Such acts arise from small, generous thoughts repeated through daily life. Even generosity of attention matters. To listen without interrupting. To put down the phone and truly hear someone. To notice the tired cashier. To speak respectfully to a cleaner, a driver, a child, an elderly person. These are not grand spiritual achievements in the eyes of the world. Yet they are the training of a heart that does not revolve only around itself. A businessman donated large sums to public causes, but was harsh to his staff and impatient with his aging father. One day his daughter asked him, "Why are you kinder to strangers in newspapers than to people in this house?" The question pierced him. He realized that part of his generosity had become linked to reputation, while daily tenderness had been neglected. From then on, he continued giving publicly, but he also began the more difficult generosity of presence and patience at home. His future changed more through the second than the first. The Buddha never separated wisdom from compassion. True wisdom sees interdependence. My life is supported by others. Therefore, selfishness is delusion. Compassion feels the vulnerability of beings. Therefore, indifference becomes difficult. From such seeing, generous thought arises naturally. If each day you feed thoughts of scarcity, even plenty will not satisfy you. If each day you feed thoughts of sharing, even modest means can become beautiful. Some of the richest people live in fear of loss. Some of the simplest people live in quiet abundance because their minds know how to give.
Generosity also frees the future from the tyranny of self-concern. A person who lives only calculating advantage becomes narrow. Every relationship becomes utility. Every choice becomes strategy. But a person who trains in giving discovers a different joy. The joy of participating in goodness. The joy of reducing suffering. The joy of not being imprisoned by the endless question, what about me? The future becomes more spacious when the thought of giving is welcomed. You become someone around whom others can breathe, not because you solve everything, but because your mind is not always taking, demanding, measuring, and defending. That itself is a great gift. So ask yourself gently each day, what can I give from where I am? Time, patience, encouragement, labor, forgiveness, money, understanding, silence, attention, food, truth, protection. Every act begins in thought. Let the thought be noble, and the hand will learn its way. No reflection on thought and future would be complete without looking at death. The Buddha encouraged recollection of death not to frighten us, but to wake us from carelessness. If life were endless, perhaps we could keep postponing clarity. But because time is uncertain, each thought matters more than we think. A person may spend years saying, I will heal later, I will forgive later, I will practice later, I will spend time with my parents later, I will be less angry later, I will speak kindly later. But death does not negotiate with our delays. It arrives in its own time. Therefore, the Buddha asks us to remember impermanence, so that we do not hand our whole life over to unexamined habit. An old tailor kept postponing a visit to his estranged brother. Their conflict had begun over money, then hardened into pride. Each year the tailor thought, next year I will go. Next festival I will go. After business improves, I will go. One winter he heard that his brother had died suddenly. He sat for a long time holding a coat he had once intended to bring as a gift. He whispered, I thought I had more time than my anger. That sentence stayed with the village for many years. When we remember death, the mind asks different questions. Is this grudge worth another month of my life? Is this vanity worth another year? Is this constant comparison worth the little time I have? Do I really want to leave this world having spent so much thought on resentment, greed, and fear? Death recollection also reveals what truly matters. Not every annoyance deserves the energy we give it. Not every desire deserves worship. Not every opinion deserves battle. Life is too brief for many of the thoughts that consume us. There is another side to this. Remembering death also makes wholesome thoughts more precious. A kind word to your mother matters because one day there will be no more chances. A patient moment with your child matters because childhood passes quickly. Sitting quietly with a friend in sorrow matters because no one remains forever. Practice matters because this very breath is not guaranteed. A young monk once asked his teacher, how often should one remember death? The teacher replied, with every breath, but not with sadness, with sobriety, so that each breath is not wasted. What a beautiful instruction. Not with sadness, with sobriety. To live aware that time is limited is not to live depressed. It is to live less trivially. It is to become more selective about what thoughts deserve a throne in the heart. If your future depends on your thoughts,
and your time is uncertain, then there is urgency in kindness, urgency in honesty, urgency in letting go, urgency in meditation, urgency in saying thank you, urgency in learning how not to be ruled by every passing mood. The thought, "I still have time," is sometimes true and sometimes not. The wiser thought may be, "While there is time, let me practice now. Let me not postpone the work of becoming more awake." One evening, a woman sat beside her sleeping child and realized with sudden force that one day she would no longer be able to watch this child breathe. Instead of sinking into sorrow, she touched the child's hair and thought, "Then let me be gentle now." That night changed the way she spoke for years afterward. Impermanence did not make her cold, it made her tender. This is one of death's hidden gifts when understood through Dharma. It strips away the illusion that we can endlessly delay love and wisdom. It reminds us that today's thought matters because today's life matters. So if there is a wholesome thought waiting in you, do not postpone it too long. If there is an apology to make, a practice to begin, a resentment to put down, a parent to call, a child to listen to, a teacher to thank, a truth to live, do not say, "Always tomorrow." The future is being built now, and now is fragile. In the Buddha's teaching, wisdom and compassion are never truly separate. A mind that becomes clear without becoming kind is incomplete. A heart that becomes kind without becoming clear may still get lost. Therefore, when we speak about thoughts shaping the future, we must speak about both wise thought and compassionate thought. A wise thought sees cause and effect. It sees impermanence. It recognizes that clinging leads to suffering. It does not believe every mood. It does not confuse desire with necessity. It understands that all beings act under conditions. A compassionate thought feels the vulnerability of life and wishes not to add harm. Together, these two qualities create a future that is both sane and warm.
May all beings be free from...
Suppose a friend keeps arriving late and breaking promises. Compassion alone, if unbalanced, may say, "It is fine, I must be understanding," while resentment silently grows underneath. Wisdom alone, if unbalanced, may say, "This person is unreliable, cut them off," with no interest in their suffering. Wisdom with compassion might say, "My friend is struggling and deserves care, but I must also speak clearly and protect what is healthy." That thought creates a different future than either indulgence or coldness. There was an old woman known in her neighborhood for feeding stray dogs. Children admired her tenderness, but some adults said she was foolish because the dogs were noisy and dirty. One day, a monk visited her and observed quietly. He saw that she not only fed them, but also helped organize vaccinations and encouraged neighbors to keep the area clean. Later he said, "Your kindness is not blind, it has eyes." She smiled and replied, "If kindness has no eyes, it may create more suffering. If wisdom has no heart, it may create loneliness." The monk bowed. This small story contains the whole path in miniature. Kindness with eyes, wisdom with heart. Why does this matter for thought? Because many harmful futures are created by thoughts that are partly good but unbalanced. A person wants peace, so they avoid every hard conversation. A parent wants discipline, so they become harsh. A practitioner wants purity, so they become rigid and judgmental. A person wants freedom, so they reject all responsibility. The mind can misuse even beautiful words,
when wisdom and compassion are not joined. The Buddha's middle way keeps asking us to look more deeply. Does this thought lead to less greed, less hatred, less delusion? Does it also lead to more patience, more truthfulness, more care? If not, it may need refinement. A nurse working in a crowded clinic became increasingly impatient with difficult patients. She still did her work well, but inwardly she thought, "People are so demanding. They should be grateful I am helping at all." Her service continued, yet compassion was drying. After attending a retreat, she returned with a different reflection. Many people become difficult when they are frightened. Let me not mistake fear for bad character every time. This did not make her job easy, but the future of her work changed. She became less burned by the very people she served. Compassionate thought is protective not only for others, but also for ourselves. Hatred exhausts the one who carries it. Harsh judgment tightens the body. Constant blame corrodes joy. A compassionate mind is not weak, it is healthier. It allows service without so much poison. It allows strength without so much violence. If you want a future of deeper peace, do not feed wisdom that makes you proud or compassion that makes you naive. Feed the union of both. Let your mind become clear enough to see truth and soft enough to remain human. When this happens, even your ordinary presence becomes medicine. People feel that you are not using them for ego. They feel that your advice is not sharpened by superiority. They feel that your boundaries are not built from contempt. They feel safe enough to tell the truth. This too is a future shaped by thought, and it begins in very small moments. The thought, "Let me understand before I judge." The thought, "Let me be honest without cruelty." The thought, "This person too wishes to be free from suffering." The thought, "Let me not abandon wisdom when emotion rises, nor abandon kindness when truth is needed." Such thoughts are noble seeds. Over time, they grow into a life that resembles the Dharma itself. Let us speak now about practice in the middle of ordinary daily life, because many people imagine that transformation belongs only to monks, nuns, or those who can spend long hours in silence. The Buddha's teaching is for the market, the kitchen, the hospital corridor, the classroom, the bus stop, the office, the farm, the prison cell, the care home, and the crowded home. In every place the mind is thinking, and in every place the future is being formed. While washing a bowl, a thought arises. Why must everything fall on me? This is a seed. Another thought may arise. Someone I love will eat from a clean bowl. This is a different seed. While waiting in traffic, a thought arises. These people are unbearable. This is a seed. Another thought may arise. We all wish to reach home safely. This is a different seed. While paying bills, a thought arises. Life is only pressure. Another thought may arise. This is difficult, but I am still trying to care for a life entrusted to me. Each thought bends the heart in a direction. A cook in a small restaurant once told a friend, "I thought spiritual practice belonged to the monastery. Then I noticed I spend all day seasoning not only food, but also my mind. If I cook with resentment, the whole body becomes hard. If I cook remembering that hungry people will eat, the work becomes lighter. The chopping is the same. The heart is not. This is beautifully said. The chopping is the same. The heart is not. A school janitor sweeping halls before dawn may think, nobody sees me, my life is low. Or he may think, these floors will welcome children in a few hours.
Let them walk into cleanliness.
One thought produces bitterness, the other, dignity. The future of his own heart changes accordingly. A student studying late into the night may think, I must be better than everyone else. Anxiety will accompany the work. Or the student may think, let me learn carefully so I may be useful in this world. The same books, the same desk, but a different path of becoming. An elderly woman living alone may think, I am forgotten. My life is only waiting now. Or she may think, I still have prayer, memory, kindness, and the power to bless others quietly. I can still send goodwill with each breath. That second thought does not deny loneliness. It transforms how loneliness is lived. Ordinary life is full of such hidden crossroads. No bell rings, no audience applauds. Yet destiny is being written in these small, unseen places. This is why the Buddha encouraged continuous mindfulness, not tense self-surveillance, but continuity of remembering. Remembering that every moment of contact is also a moment of planting. Remembering that the mind easily falls asleep and follows old grooves. Remembering that a new groove requires care. It can help to choose a few anchor thoughts for daily life. Before speaking, may my words not harm. Before eating, may I receive this with gratitude. Before work, may this labor serve more than my ego. When anger rises, let me not add fuel. When fear rises, let me return to what is true now. When jealousy rises, may others also flourish. When tiredness rises, let me be gentle and simple. These are not slogans to repeat mechanically. They are directions for the heart. A man caring for his wife during a long illness was asked how he endured such difficult days. He said, I stopped telling myself I was losing my freedom and started telling myself I was being given a final chance to love well. That thought did not remove fatigue, but it changed the meaning of the fatigue. This is precisely how thought shapes the future. The same act can become a prison or a sacred offering depending on the mind inhabiting it. So do not wait for a special place to begin. The next email, the next meal, the next delay, the next misunderstanding, the next chore, the next lonely evening, the next moment of praise, the next moment of blame. These are enough. They are already the path if you meet them with awareness. The future is not somewhere else. It is entering the room disguised as the next thought. Sometimes the most destructive thoughts are not loud. They are quiet, repetitive, and socially acceptable. Thoughts like, I must always appear strong. I cannot let anyone see weakness. My worth depends on success. I am valuable only when useful. If others are disappointed, I have failed as a person. These thoughts often go unchallenged for years because they seem responsible or ambitious. Yet they create deep suffering. The Buddha saw that clinging to identity is one of the great burdens of the human heart. We build a self out of roles, achievements, wounds, opinions, and fears, then spend enormous energy protecting it. The future becomes shaped by the demand to keep that self-image alive.
A father believes, I must never show uncertainty. So instead of listening, he dominates. A spiritual practitioner believes, I must always appear calm. So instead of admitting pain, she hides it. A successful businessman believes, I am what I have built. So when loss comes, he collapses as though his whole being has been erased. In each case, the problem is not the role itself. It is the thought that turns a temporary role into the whole of identity. There was a musician who lost partial hearing in one ear. For months, he could not accept it. He thought, if I cannot perform as before, I am nothing. This thought darkened his life far more than the hearing loss alone. Eventually, he met a meditation teacher who asked, before you were a musician, were you not also breathing? Before applause, were you not also alive? Before the world's naming, what was here? The question unsettled him, but slowly it softened something. He began teaching children instead of only performing on stage and discovered a new form of joy. The future changed when the thought, I am only this, loosened its grip. The Buddha's teaching of non-self is often misunderstood as cold or abstract, but in lived practice, it can be liberating. It means you do not have to worship every identity the mind creates. You are not only your success, not only your failure, not only your trauma, not only your beauty, not only your role in the family, not only your job, not only the opinions others hold about you. These things matter, yes, but none of them can fully contain the living process of being. Why does this matter for thought? Because when the mind stops clinging so tightly to fixed identity, many thoughts lose their power. Criticism hurts less because the whole self is not on trial. Change becomes less terrifying because there is less rigid self-image to defend. Humility becomes easier because one does not need to appear complete. Compassion becomes easier because others too are seen as more than their current role or wound. A retired teacher became deeply depressed after leaving the classroom. For 40 years, she had been needed, respected, and busy. Now she thought, without students, who am I? The thought narrowed her world. After some months, she began volunteering at a small library, then reading to children on weekends. One afternoon, she said to a friend, I see now that I was holding too tightly to one form of usefulness. Life had not ended. One chapter had ended. That new thought gave birth to new life. So when you notice thoughts driven by identity, look gently but deeply. Is this role being held wisely or worshipped? Is this image helping me serve or making me afraid of change? If it vanished tomorrow, would I still know how to bow to life? Your future becomes lighter when the mind no longer demands that one fragile story carry your whole existence. Then thoughts can become more spacious, more curious, less defensive, more free. The Buddha's path does not erase individuality. It frees individuality from imprisonment inside ego. And that freedom changes everything. There is one more thought that shapes the future more than most people realize. It is the thought of beginning again. Many lives remain stuck, not because there is no way forward, but because the mind keeps saying, it is too late. I have ruined too much. I am too old. I am too wounded. I have repeated this pattern too many times. Nothing will change. This thought may wear the mask of realism, but often it is despair protecting itself from the vulnerability of trying again.
The Buddha's teaching is full of fresh beginnings, not because human beings are flawless, but because causes can be changed, habits can be weakened, new intentions can be planted. Even after great confusion, a person can turn. This turning may not erase all old consequences at once, but it opens a new direction. A middle-aged man who had spent many years drinking heavily once heard a Dharma talk on mindfulness. He felt moved, yet another thought quickly arose. These teachings are for people who have not already damaged everything. Still, something in him remained touched. The next morning, instead of making a grand vow, he began with one simple act. Before drinking, he would pause and place his hand on his chest for 3 breaths. The first week, he still drank. The second week, he still drank, but a little less. Over months, the pause grew. The pause became reflection. Reflection became help-seeking. Help-seeking became recovery. If he had worshipped the thought, "It is too late," his future would have continued in darkness. But he fed the thought, "Let me begin from here." This is often how change happens. Not dramatically, but faithfully. One pause, one apology, one less harsh word, one honest conversation, one evening of sitting quietly instead of feeding distraction, one visit to an aging parent, one act of generosity when greed wanted to close the hand, one day of not repeating the same grievance. Begin there. The Buddha compared spiritual practice to turning a great ship. It does not spin instantly in a narrow place. It turns gradually through repeated effort. So do not insult small beginnings. A small beginning practiced sincerely may become the gate to an entirely different life. There was an elderly woman who had never learned to read. She felt ashamed her whole life and believed wisdom belonged to other people. In her 70s, she began attending weekly Dharma gatherings. She could not follow written texts, so she simply listened. Every night, she practiced one sentence the teacher often repeated: "Guard the heart, and do not let bitterness sleep there." Over time, those words transformed her. She became calmer, more forgiving, and more joyful than many educated people around her. She said, "I could not begin early, but I can still begin truly." What a beautiful thought. If you are listening with a tired heart, please hear this clearly. The future is not changed by shame. It is changed by practice. It is not changed by hating who you have been. It is changed by becoming more awake in who you are now. It is not changed by demanding instant purity. It is changed by patient honesty. Perhaps you have spent years in anger. Begin with one moment of not feeding the next angry thought. Perhaps you have spent years in self-contempt. Begin with one moment of speaking inwardly with dignity. Perhaps you have spent years in distraction. Begin with 5 quiet minutes. Perhaps you have spent years waiting for others to change. Begin by watching your own mind today. The thought, "I can begin again," is not naive. It is one of the most powerful thoughts on the path. It opens karma in a wholesome direction. It prevents old identity from becoming destiny. It allows the Dharma to enter places long abandoned. So if something in your life feels hardened, do not ask first whether it can be fixed completely. Ask whether a wiser seed can be planted today. Often, that is enough to begin turning the whole field. As we come closer to the end of this reflection, let us gather the teaching into something very simple. A thought is small in appearance, but not small in consequence. A thought becomes a feeling. A feeling becomes a tendency. A tendency becomes speech. Speech becomes action. Action becomes habit. Habit becomes character. Character shapes destiny. This is why the Buddha cared so much about the quality of mind. He was not asking us to become frightened of ourselves. He was showing us where freedom begins. If you feed contempt, your future becomes colder. If you feed reverence, your future becomes teachable. If you feed resentment, your future becomes heavy. If you feed forgiveness, your future becomes lighter. If you feed fear, your future becomes narrow. If you feed courage, your future becomes spacious. If you feed greed, your future becomes restless. If you feed generosity, your future becomes abundant. If you feed comparison, your future becomes poor even in riches. If you feed gratitude, your future becomes rich even in simplicity. And if you feed mindfulness, your future begins to include choice. That is a precious sentence. If you feed mindfulness, your future begins to include choice. Without mindfulness, old conditioning chooses. Old wounds choose. Impulse chooses. Pride chooses. Fear chooses. With mindfulness, wisdom has a chance to enter. There is no need to wait for perfect conditions. Right now, as you listen, thoughts are moving. Some may be agreeing. Some may be doubting. Some may be tired. Some may be peaceful. All of them are passing through the space of awareness. This itself can be seen, and because it can be seen, it need not always rule. Perhaps tonight, before sleeping, instead of carrying the whole world into bed, you can ask gently, what did I feed today? What thoughts did I strengthen? Which ones led to contraction? Which ones led to peace? What one wholesome thought would I like to water tomorrow? This is a beautiful evening practice. Honest, simple, transformative. Perhaps tomorrow morning, before touching the day, you can set one intention. Today, let me protect the mind from unnecessary bitterness. Or, today, let me speak with less harm. Or, today, when fear rises, let me return to the breath. Or, today, let me remember gratitude 3 times. Small intentions become pathways when lived. A monk was once asked to summarize years of practice in a few words. He said, "Notice early." This answer may sound plain, but it is brilliant. Notice early. Notice irritation before it becomes a speech.
They are subject to
Notice craving before it becomes grasping. Notice pride before it becomes contempt. Notice sadness before it becomes despair. Notice tenderness before the world rushes you past it. Notice gratitude before habit swallows it. Notice early. Much suffering can be prevented there. And when you fail, as all practitioners do, begin again without drama. Learn, bow, continue. Failure itself can become fuel for humility if the right thought meets it. Even a difficult day can become practice when seen clearly. If this teaching has touched something true in your heart, you may leave a quiet like or subscribe to Buddha Peaceful Mind. Not for numbers alone, but so these gentle reminders of awareness, compassion, and wisdom can keep reaching those who may be standing at a very painful crossroads inside their own minds. Sometimes all a person needs is one calm voice to remind them not to believe the darkest thought passing through their heart. May we be such reminders for one another. Before we close, let us sit for a final moment with the image of the two merchants. They stood in the same place. They saw the same Buddha. They lived under the same sky. Yet one future bent toward blessing and the other toward suffering, because their minds did not meet the moment in the same way. That image is happening every day in countless forms. Two daughters care for the same aging parent. One feeds resentment, one feeds gratitude. Two workers lose the same opportunity. One feeds bitterness, one feeds determination. Two people receive correction. One feeds pride, one feeds humility. Two friends are betrayed. One feeds hatred, one feeds wisdom and boundaries. Two patients hear frightening news. One feeds despair, one feeds courage. Two practitioners notice unwholesome thoughts. One identifies with them, one observes and lets them pass. Again and again, the outer event may be similar, but the inner response opens different roads. This is why the future is not only something that happens to us, it is also something we are participating in through the mind we are cultivating. No one can promise you a life without pain. The Buddha did not make that promise. Bodies will still age, weather will still change, people will still disappoint, plans will still fail, goodbyes will still come. But the difference between a mind trained in wisdom and a mind abandoned to habit is immense. One continues creating extra suffering. The other begins to meet suffering in a way that frees the heart. Please remember this when life becomes difficult. Do not ask only, "Why is this happening?" Also ask, "What am I planting in response?" Am I planting more fear, more blame, more self-hatred? Or am I planting patience, truth, courage, and compassion? This question can rescue years. And please remember this when life becomes beautiful. Do not ask only, "How can I keep this forever?" Also ask, "Can I receive this with gratitude and not cling? Can I let joy make me more generous rather than more afraid of loss?" Pleasant conditions also test the mind. Craving can grow there as easily as bitterness grows in pain. So in joy too, watch the thought. There is no area of life outside this teaching. Parenting, marriage, loneliness, money, aging, illness, service, leadership, grief, success, reputation, failure, spiritual practice. All of it is touched by the quality of thought we keep feeding. That is why the Buddha began so close to the heart. He was showing us the hidden workshop where worlds are made. May you become intimate with that workshop. May you notice the thought that says judge and gently choose understanding. May you notice the thought that says despair and gently choose the next step. May you notice the thought that says hold tightly and gently choose trust. May you notice the thought that says not enough and gently choose gratitude. May you notice the thought that says strike back and gently choose non-harming. May you notice the thought that says too late
and gently choose beginning again. May you notice the thought that says, I am separate, and gently choose compassion.
And when you forget, may you remember again. This is the path. Not perfect thoughts from the very start, but increasing wisdom about which thoughts deserve to be fed. Not a sudden escape from being human, but a beautiful maturing within our humanity. Not magic, but lawful tenderness. Not control over everything, but freedom in the midst of changing conditions. If you carry anything from this teaching into the rest of your day, let it be this: guard the mind with kindness. The next thought matters. The future is listening. May your thoughts become clear. May your heart become gentle. May your speech become truthful. May your actions become compassionate. May your days become more awake. And may the future growing from this very moment lead you and all beings toward peace.